The donkey was left behind like it meant nothing, until one cowboy opened his heart. The rope was still tied to the post when I rode in. Not a long rope, maybe 8 feet of old hemp, frayed at the knot end where whoever owned it had simply cut and left. The donkey stood there at the end of it, not pulling, not braying, just standing in the dust outside Delacroix's trading post with its long ears angled back, and its eyes doing that thing donkeys do, looking at you like it already knows more than you're willing to admit. I should have kept riding. That's what I told myself. I had reasons to keep riding. I had a direction, which isn't the same as a destination but felt like enough. I had $6 and change in my coat pocket and a sorrel mare under me who hadn't thrown a shoe in 3 weeks, which was the closest thing to good luck I'd had in some time. I had a route planned east toward the Cimarron country, where a man named Duff Petties had offered me work tending his cattle through the fall gather. Honest work, no questions. That was the only kind I was fit for anymore. I kept riding. I got about 40 yards past the post before I pulled up. I don't know what it was exactly. The stillness of the animal, maybe. The way the rope was cut, not worked loose, not broken by some accident, but cut deliberate, which meant someone had stood there and made a decision. Someone had stood there and decided the donkey didn't matter enough to deal with properly. Didn't matter enough to sell, or give away, or even tie somewhere decent. Just cut the rope short and walked off. I sat there on the mare and looked back at it. Small animal, brown mostly, with a stripe down its spine that was almost black. One ear had a notch in it from some old fight or accident. Its ribs showed a little, not terrible, but enough that you could see it. The post it was tied to was the only shade for about 200 yards in any direction, and the sun that afternoon was the kind that feels personal. I turned the mare around. Inside the trading post, a man named Delacroix was sweeping the floor with the enthusiasm of a man who wished he was doing anything else. He was short and dark-haired and wore suspenders over a shirt that had given up on being clean a long time ago. He told me the donkey had been there since 2 days prior. A woman traveling alone, heading northeast, had left it. Not abandoned, she'd asked Delacroix to watch it until her brother came for it. But the brother wasn't coming. Delacroix knew that even when she asked, and she probably knew it too. She just left it, I said. She had no choice about it. Her horse came up lame and she bought passage on a freight wagon heading to Morrow Creek. Wagon driver wouldn't take the donkey. She cried some and then she didn't, and then she got on the wagon. I asked where the wagon was headed after Morrow Creek. Delacroix looked at me the way men look at you, when they can see you doing something you haven't admitted to yourself yet. Garrison, he said, but she won't make it past Morrow Creek. Word came this morning, Dry Forks flooded. The Juneau cutoff is the only road through, and that's another 3 days on foot from Morrow Creek even in good weather. I bought grain for the donkey and a tin of beans for myself and I left. I watered the donkey at the trough out back and fed it with my hand, which it allowed, carefully, like it was deciding whether to trust me. Then I tied the lead to my saddle horn with about 6 feet of slack and started northeast on the Garrison Road. The donkey's name, I found out later, was Absalom. The woman had told Delacroix. She told him the name like it mattered that someone knew it. My name is Cal Devereaux, and I am going to tell you the truth about that summer, which I have not told anyone in its entirety before this. I was not a man in full working order when I came to that trading post. I want to be honest about that, because the rest of it doesn't make sense otherwise. My wife Nora had been dead for 2 years. Not gone, dead. There's a difference in how you carry it. She died in March of the year before last, of a fever that came fast and left nothing to fight and was over in 9 days. She was 31. We had been married 6 years and I had been stupid enough, in the way men are stupid about the things they have, to think 6 years was the beginning and not the middle. After that I worked when I could stand to stay in one place and drifted when I couldn't. I was not drinking myself to death, which I want to say because it's true and because it's one of the things I was still clear-eyed about. I wasn't drinking or gambling or doing any of the obvious ruination a man can do to himself. I was just absent, present in body, going through the motions of being a person, eating when I thought about it, sleeping when I was tired enough, working until the work was done, and then leaving before anyone could expect me to be a human being about it. That's the man who found Absalom tied to a post. That's the man who, for reasons he couldn't have explained at the time, turned his mare around and went back. I think now it was because I understood something about being left somewhere and not knowing if anyone was coming. Morrow Creek was 2 days' ride, and Absalom set the pace, which was not fast. A loaded pack mule will do 4 miles an hour if you push it. Absalom was not a mule and I was not pushing, so we did closer to 3, which gave me a lot of time to think, which was exactly what I'd been trying to avoid. The first day the donkey walked directly behind the mare, keeping about 4 feet of slack in the lead. By the second morning it walked beside her. I don't know what negotiation happened between them on the first night, but something did. The sorrel, whose name was Eunice and who had opinions, had barely tolerated the arrangement at first. By the second day, she was matching her stride to the donkey's, without seeming to know she was doing it. I noticed I was talking to the donkey. Not a lot, not like a man who'd lost his grip, just occasional observations about the country we were moving through, the way the grass had gone silver in the dry heat, a hawk sitting on a fence post for so long it looked carved, the smell of rain on caliche that never actually came. Small things. Things I used to say to Nora when we rode together, which we did often because she liked riding and I liked anything that put us next to each other. I stopped talking after I realized it. But I noticed that I'd been doing it. Noticed there was still something in me that wanted to say things out loud to a creature that would hear them. I found the wagon broken down 4 miles south of Morrow Creek. Front left wheel had dropped into a rut and cracked the hub clean. The driver, a heavy-set man with a red beard and the expression of someone for whom things were always going wrong, was sitting on a rock 20 yards away, smoking and looking at the wagon like he blamed it personally. There were 2 other passengers, an older couple heading to see their daughter, who were also sitting and waiting, but in the patient way of people who have learned that waiting is most of what life asks of you. The woman was standing beside the wagon. She was watching me come down the road and watching Absalom, and I saw the moment she recognized him, not a flinch but a stillness, a holding. She was maybe 35, dark-haired, medium height, wearing a gray traveling dress that had seen better days and a look on her face that was carefully arranged to show nothing while showing everything. She walked to the donkey before she said anything to me. Absalom went to her with a sound I had not heard it make before, low, almost a groan, the sound of an animal that has been worried and is now not. She put both hands on its face and held it there, forehead to forehead, and did not say anything, and I looked away because it felt like something private. "Delacroix told me," I said when she turned around. "You came from Delacroix's." "2 days back. I'm headed to Garrison if Morrow Creek will let me through." She looked at me a moment, just steady, taking me in. Brown eyes with the kind of focus that comes from a life that required you to read people fast and read them right. She introduced herself as Vera Halst. Her brother had been supposed to collect the donkey. She said it flat, no apology in it, like stating a fact she was done being hurt by. "He's not coming," I said. "No," a pause. "Did Delacroix's grain hold out?" "I bought more in Riota." She looked at the donkey again, then back at me. "Why?" It was a direct question, the kind that deserves a direct answer. I didn't have one I was willing to say, so I said the small true thing instead of the large one. "He was still tied to the post." She held that for a moment. Then she nodded once like something had been decided. "The wheel won't be fixed before dark," she said. "Driver says there's a town smith in Morrow Creek, but he won't go tonight. If you're willing to share a fire, I've got coffee and dried beef. Absalom can graze. In the morning we can follow the Juneau cutoff together if you don't mind the pace. I said I didn't mind the pace. I will tell you something about that fire, about that first night. We didn't talk much. That's not what I mean to say, we talked some. The ordinary talk of two strangers who are not strangers in the way you become not strangers when you've both been handed the same piece of hard weather and decided to share it. She told me she'd come from Kansas, that she'd been going to Garrison to teach school, that the job had been arranged through letters, and she'd never seen the town. I told her I was going to Garrison for cattle work. I didn't tell her about Nora. She didn't ask about what I was running from, which I appreciated. What I mean about the fire is this. At some point in the middle of it, I looked across the flames at Vera Halst, not on purpose, just looked up from my coffee, and for the first time in 2 years I was entirely present in the moment I was in. Not thinking about Nora, not thinking about anywhere else. Just there. Watching the fire move on her face, and listening to the creek run somewhere in the dark, and aware that Absalom was breathing steadily at the edge of the light, and that the night smelled like juniper and cooling dirt. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then I was back to being who I'd been for 2 years, and I poured what was left of my coffee on the ground and said good night and went to my bedroll. But I lay there and felt it, the 10 seconds of it, for a long time. The Juneau cutoff is not a road in any formal sense. It's a track beaten by enough feet and hooves over enough years that it holds its shape mostly through breaks in the mesa country. 3 days on foot, 2 days on horseback, maybe less if you pushed. But Vera had the donkey and no horse, and the freight wagon driver, newly cooperative now that the wheel was fixed and he was behind schedule, wanted no further detours. I said she could ride the sorrel and I'd walk. She said she would not take my horse and walk me to death on a trail she didn't know. I said I knew the trail some. She said some wasn't enough. We stood there and looked at each other in the early morning light outside Morrow Creek, with Absalom between us like a judge, and eventually I said there was a solution if she was willing. Eunice was strong enough for 2 if we didn't push. Vera could ride behind and Absalom could follow on the lead. It would be slow. She'd be sharing a saddle with a man she'd known for 16 hours. Vera looked at the trail, looked at the donkey, looked at me with that steady brown-eyed consideration. "All right," she said, "but I want to be clear, I'm not fragile. If you slow down on account of having a woman behind you, I'll know it and I'll be annoyed." I told her I didn't plan to slow down. "Good," she said, and took my offered hand and put her foot in the stirrup like she'd done it 100 times, which maybe she had. 3 days. I want to tell you about those 3 days with some care, because they mattered and I don't want to oversell them. The first day was just riding. The mesa country coming up around us, red and gray and cut through with draws that had water in the bottom if you knew where to look. Vera rode well, better than most. She had a balanced seat, and she moved with Eunice rather than against her, which mattered on trail ground. She didn't talk more than the terrain required. I told her when to duck and when to hold, and when the mare was going to step funny coming off loose shale, and she listened and did it and didn't make conversation about it. By midday I was aware of her hands on either side of my coat, not holding, just resting lightly, the way you do when you're riding behind someone, and you've decided they're trustworthy enough not to need to hold on. I was aware of the warmth of her, which I hadn't been aware of another person's warmth in a long time. By afternoon she was pointing things out, a pair of antelope on a ridge so still they looked painted, a formation of rock that looked, from a certain angle, exactly like a seated man with his hat pulled down. I said I'd ridden this country before and never seen that. She said maybe you have to be coming from the other direction. That's the kind of thing Nora used to say. Not the same words, different woman, different mind, but the same habit of looking at things from the turn you hadn't considered. I held that thought, turned it over, set it down. That evening I made camp while Vera watered the animals, and she made the fire while I stripped the saddle, And it went like that, without discussion, each of us finding what needed doing and doing it, which is a particular kind of ease that you can't manufacture, and that most people never find at all. The second day was harder. The trail through the upper mesa cut was rougher than I remembered, which meant it had gone without use for a while, which meant fallen timber in 2 places and a creek crossing where the bank had eroded to almost nothing. I took the crossing on foot, leading Eunice through the belly-deep water with Vera on her back and the donkey on the lead behind. And the current was cold and stronger than it looked, and I slipped once on the bottom and went to one knee. Vera's hand was on my shoulder before I was back up, not pulling, not helping exactly, just there, the weight of it. "You good?" she said. "Fine." "You went down hard." "Creek slick." I got up and got the mare across and then went back for Absalom, who had strong opinions about the crossing but eventually came through. When I got back to the bank, Vera was already down and wringing water from the hem of her dress, and she didn't say anything about the fall or make anything of it, which I appreciated more than I could have said. We lost 2 hours to that crossing and to the timber clearing, and by the time we made camp, the light was going fast, and we were both tired in the real way, bone tired, the kind of tired that strips away whatever performance you're putting on and leaves just the person. She said, while we were eating, "You're not going to Garrison for the cattle work." I looked at her. "I mean, you are," she said, "but that's not why you're going. You're going because it was far enough." I was quiet for a while. The fire was low. Absalom was already down, which donkeys don't do unless they feel safe. "My wife died," I said, 2 years ago." Vera was quiet, not filling the space, not reaching for words, just receiving it. "I've been moving since," I said. "I don't know what else to do." She looked into the fire. "I think you know," she said. "I think you stopped at that post because you know, you just haven't admitted it to yourself yet." I didn't answer that. "The donkey was left," she said, "and you turned around. That was someone deciding to still be in the world." I felt something happen in my chest then. Not break, I'm not going to say break, because it wasn't that. More like something that had been locked for 2 years gave slightly, the way a door does when the wood's been wet and swollen and you put your shoulder against it in just the right spot. I poured her coffee, because it was what I had to offer. She took it, both hands around the tin, and looked at me steady in the firelight, and what was in her face was not pity, which would have closed me up again like nothing else. It was something plainer than that. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who has also been handed a thing that cost more than they planned and carried it anyway. I will tell you about the third day plainly, because I think it wants to be said plain. We came off the mesa country by mid-morning and the Garrison road opened up ahead, flat and clear and dust-white in the sun, and the town was visible in the distance, maybe 8 miles out, the water tower and the church steeple and the smudge of cottonwoods along the creek. Vera had been quiet since breakfast, not cold, just internal, thinking her way toward something. About 4 miles out, she said, "Cal." It was the first time she'd used my name. "I want to say something, and I'd like you to just hear it before you say anything." I said, "All right." "You're a careful man," she said, "and you've been carrying something heavy for a long time, and you've been doing it without letting it make you small. You found my donkey and brought him 2 days out of your way because he was tied to a post. You carried me across that creek without making anything of it. You haven't once asked me for more than I was giving." She paused. "I don't think you know how rare that is. I think you stopped knowing somewhere along the way." I looked at the road ahead. "I'm going to teach school in a town I've never seen," she said. "And you're going to work cattle on someone else's land. And I'm not saying any of this has to be more than 3 days on a trail. But I'm saying I see you, Cal DeVero. I see the shape of you. And it's a good shape." I held that for a while. The mare walked on. Absalom's hooves made their small rhythm behind us. "You're the first person who said anything like that to me since Nora," I said. "I know," she said. "That's why I said it." Her hands, which had been resting on either side of my coat, shifted. She put them together, flat against my back, right at the center, and held them there. Not reaching around, not an embrace, just her hands on my back, steady and still. The weight of two people trusting the same stretch of ground. I put my right hand over hers. Just for a moment, long enough to feel the warmth of it and let it in. Then I put my hand back on the rein, and we rode the last 4 miles into Garrison in the afternoon light, the three of us, and the cottonwoods came up green around us as we crossed the creek into town. I took the cattle work with Duff Petty's, and I was good at it, which I had always been, and it was enough for the fall. Vera started school in September. I know because Garrison is a small town and cattle work is a slow life, and sometimes in the evening I walked past the schoolhouse and heard her voice through the open window, reading something to the children in that flat, clear, serious way she had, and it was a good thing to hear. We had supper together on 3 Sundays in October. At the diner on the main street, the one with the blue curtains and the bad coffee that she drank without complaint, and I drank with a great deal of complaint, which made her laugh the first time and smile after that because she knew it was coming. I told her about Nora in pieces on those Sundays. Not everything, I couldn't do everything, not then, but pieces. She listened the way she'd listened at the fire, receiving it, not filling the space, and when she did speak, it was never to tell me what I felt or how long it should take. She just said what she knew, which was usually less than I expected and exactly right. She told me about the brother. He was not a villain, just a man who had given up on being reliable so gradually that he could pretend he didn't know it had happened. She wasn't angry. She'd gotten past angry and landed somewhere quieter and more permanent, which is what happens when you accept that someone is exactly what they've shown you they are. In November, the cattle work wound down, and I had to make a decision. I sat with it for 2 days, not weighing anything in the obvious sense. I knew what I wanted. I'd known for a while. What I was sitting with was whether I was willing to want it, whether I was going to let myself back into the business of having something to lose. On the 3rd evening, I went to the schoolhouse when I knew she'd be there late, grading the children's work by lantern light, which she did on Thursdays. I knocked on the door and she called me in and looked up from the papers and waited. "I'm not going to Cimarron Country," I said. She set her pen down. "I'd like to stay through the winter if there's work, and I stopped, because I was not a man practiced in saying what I'd like, not anymore. "I'd like to see where this goes, if you're willing." Vera looked at me for a long moment in the lantern light, steady, the way she looked at everything, the creek crossing, the trail, the fire, me, reading the shape of it. "I've been willing for a while, Cal," she said. "I know," I said. "I needed some time." "I know," she said. She reached across the desk and put her hand out, palm up, open, not demanding, not pulling, just there, an offer, a door set slightly open in just the right spot. I crossed the room and took it. I have been thinking lately about what it means to turn around. Not in the grand sense, not in the sense of a man making some large decision about his life. I mean the small physical thing, the moment at the trading post, 40 yards down the road, when I pulled the sorrel up and sat there and then turned her around and went back. That's where it started. Not at the fire, not on the trail, not in the schoolhouse. At a post on a dusty road where a donkey was standing in the sun on the end of a cut rope, waiting to see what was going to happen next. Absalom lives in the small paddock behind the schoolhouse. He has an understanding with Eunice that I do not fully comprehend, but that both animals seem satisfied with. He is fed well and his ribs don't show anymore, and he has a habit in the evenings of standing at the fence and watching the road the way he was watching the road that day at Delacroix's, patient, ears up, like he always knew someone was coming. Maybe he did. Vera says that's sentimental. I say some things are allowed to be. She smiles at that. The particular smile that means she agrees with me and isn't going to say so, which is one of the things I have learned to read about her, and which I carry with me the way I used to carry only loss. It's heavy, that worth. But it's a different kind of heavy, the kind you want to keep carrying.